recording now. We'll go ahead and get started and let people come and go as they wish. I want to welcome you to this evening's In the City for Good candidate forum for the general election and for folks standing for city council. Your microphones have been muted and the chat room is closed. As I mentioned, we're streaming live to our Facebook channel, and the forum is being recorded. The recording of the forum will be available on our YouTube page sometime tomorrow morning. My name is Dave Beal, and I'm your host. I'm a member of In the City for Good. In the City for Good is a grassroots organization formed in 2015 in response to the challenges and opportunities of growth in Rochester, with the belief that all residents should share in the responsibilities and benefits of that growth. Our members are organized into action teams that meet regularly to promote well-informed citizens and participation in civic governance. We host several public forums on local issues each year. This is our third round of candidate forums. We can be reached at inthecityforgood@gmail.com. Though we believe there's a value in witnessing candidates think on their feet and measure their off-the-cuff familiarity with issues, we think it is also useful to hear from them on questions they've had an opportunity to think about. With that in mind, each year we have provided candidates with questions prepared by our action teams. Each group has submitted 2 questions. For each question, candidates were asked to prepare a 2-minute response. Each candidate in the forum will be asked to reply to the same question. We have also invited the community to submit questions, and we'll include those as time permits. Candidates have also been given 2 minutes for closing remarks, and they can use that time as they choose. And we thank you for joining us. And tonight we have with us the 2 candidates who are standing for election in Ward 2, Michael Wojcik, who is the incumbent, and Mark Bransford, who is his challenger. We'll move through the forum by rotating. We'll start alphabetically, and we'll begin with the first question with Mark.
Is it a question, or do you want me to introduce myself?
No, we're going to assume that folks know you.
Oh, okay.
And so, and we'll get to the questions, and in lieu of opening statements, we'll just get to the questions and then have you have a closing.
Perfect. Okay.
The first 2 questions are from our housing action team. What do you see as your role on seeking solutions and options for affordable and accessible housing in Rochester?
Yeah, we have not only do we have an affordable housing shortage in Rochester, I think in general we have a housing shortage. We need housing of all types, and we don't have it. If you think about it, from 2008, at the beginning of the Great Recession up till now, the city had an opportunity to revive and guide the revival of the housing market such that this wouldn't be a problem now. But because of increased fees and regulatory red tape, which I think was purposeful to try to create an environment where it was easier to build downtown instead of across the city, we've painted ourselves in a corner. We are on an unsustainable trajectory where we have too much high density downtown, and it's gentrifying downtown. Land costs are high, construction costs are way too high. We can't get around the fact that it's going to just be very, very expensive. Not only that, we're not building the kind of housing people want. We have 30,000 people commuting a day into Rochester. Why? Because we're not building what people want. We're creating bedroom communities. And in fact, that's true sprawl. If you think about it, we have bedroom communities. We're building a Rochester suburbia. We get all their traffic, but none of their tax monies or economic benefit. So my role in the city council will be to try to correct that by coming up with a good plan to try to figure out how we reduce the fees, how we get the cost of housing down, squarely on the city council to try to figure out how to fix that. And I'd like to get in there and dig us out of the hole we've created.
Okay. Michael? Just so you all know, Michael and Mark are both maybe have some bandwidth issues, and so they might be turning their cameras off occasionally when they're not speaking. So, Michael?
Thank you for the question. My name is Michael Wojak. I am the senior member of the Rochester City Council and somebody who's been very involved in issues related to affordable housing. And I want to say above all else, if you're not willing to fight NIMBYism, not in my backyard, and sprawl, as a city council member, we are never going to address these issues. We are geographically bigger than Minneapolis or St. Paul with a fraction of the population. We need to be smarter and do better, and that's what the comprehensive plan that I helped get in place is going to do. In terms of specific things that we can be doing, and there's going to be a lot of terms here, and I encourage you to visit votewojak.org. Because if you have questions, I'm willing to answer every single one of them. You'll find that I lay out very clearly what my positions are on these issues because I want you to know what the concrete actions that we as individuals are going to take to address these issues in the community. Two people will not get different answers from me. I give the same answer to everybody, irrespective of whether it's popular or not. Things that we are doing in the city now and should continue to do, we frequently use incentive and restricted density in appropriate places. Tax increment financing is a tremendous tool that we can use for 60 and 60% AMI units. And again, some of these terms might need some explaining. We use nearly 100% of our federal community development block grants to assist with housing and maintaining affordable housing. Sometimes we issue conduit debt, particularly for 50 and 60% AMI units. We've initiated a pilot using a 4D tax incentive that's going to allow us to do more affordable housing and helps get those projects done. We've substantially increased all housing units, more than 6,000 since 2014. We've improved processes, including separating our planning department from Olmsted County and made tremendous gains there, reduced red tape. We have a new comprehensive plan, R2X zoning, which I strongly support, and TOD, which helps as well. We have to look at total housing. Even places that might be described as luxury, like the Berkman, provide hundreds of units that are more cost effective for people to live in than what was there before. We need to refine parkland edification. We need to target our incentives to affordable housing, not sprawl, and improve the usage of underutilized land, take a look at Airbnb regulations, and take a look at attached dwelling units. That's a lot. That's what we're doing. That's what I'm leading on in affordable housing.
Thank you. The next question also relates to housing, and I think each of you may have touched on part of your response here, but it'll give you an opportunity to maybe talk about it in more detail. Many solutions have been proposed to address the lack of affordable and accessible housing in Rochester. Which solutions do you support and why? Michael?
Well, that long list that I rattled off in the last answer, every single one of those are items that I have not only support, but I've led on these issues going forward. And I think that's important when we look at the cost of housing. We look at the total cost, and that includes energy, which speaks to how you locate housing and what kind of transportation is required. Automobile only housing is always going to be more expensive, as is single family detached. Every single idea that I present to you is something that can be done in a way that is financially, socially, and environmentally sustainable. And that's not what we've been doing as a community for far too long. We've grown beyond our ability to maintain infrastructure. We're always going to have to pay for infrastructure, and it's a matter of who's going to pay for it. So a lot of people can throw up cute talking points about what we can do better, what we should do better. But the reality is this is a problem that a lot of communities are facing. It requires solutions. So the key thing that we are doing is taking a look at those major transit ways, places like 2nd Street and Broadway, and figuring out how can we create more housing options in that corridor? How do we do so better? And how do we work closely with the neighborhood associations that are there so we can go hand in hand and bring forward projects that have broad community support? I'm proud that we did that on the Berkman and a number of other other infill development projects. And that is the future and the true path to affordable housing. Simply throwing more money at more infrastructure and sprawl is a recipe for disaster. We know that what we're doing in Rochester works because even though we're a smaller portion of the county, 86% of the population growth since the last census has actually happened in Rochester and Olmsted County, meaning we are outgrowing the rest of the county. So despite what you might hear, we're doing a better job and we're proud of it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Mark?
Yeah, I'm curious about the whole idea that we're growing. We're not growing. Why are we talking about a housing problem and a housing shortage if we're growing properly? I don't understand that. And specifics, I do have a lot of specifics, actually. I've spent 6 months getting my campaign together. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of conversations with people into this. And I know for a fact that we are not creating housing that people want because we have 30,000 people that commute here a day. What we need to do to address this is, first of all, we need a line item in the budget specifically for housing and affordable housing. We need to have some really transparent reporting of things like excess fees, permit fees, water and sewer fees, the cost versus the actual revenue the city gains from that. There are going to be cases where we should think about having city staff actually devoted to creating affordable housing. And like with downtown, we had this laser beam focus on creating housing. It's all high end. I don't know how a $6,000 a month penthouse in the Berkman is considered affordable. The lowest is $1,200. Not a lot of people can afford that. That's not the right answer. Some of that is needed. Yes, we do need density downtown, but we have done that at the expense of housing that people want and need. I have a son who wants to go to Winona State, get a teacher's degree, buy a house here and live nearby. He can't do it. He just is being priced out. And if you go to markbransford.com, you will see a very, very detailed list of suggestions that I have put together over time to address this issue.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, the next question starts with you, and these next two questions come from our social justice and social service action team. The first of those is, what specific actions will you propose to create a racially just city? And in answering that, what should DMC and the DMC EDA be doing to address those issues?
It's a great question. And one of the things that I like to do is just not talk about these social justice issues. I'm as compassionate as anybody. Black Lives Matter. We need social justice here in Rochester and everywhere else. But I want to go beyond just talking about it. So I reached out to a couple people, Crystal Smith and Jackie Booth, and because they're in the trenches. They're in the trenches trying to figure out how to help the people that are low income, poor, that live in essentially projects in terrible housing on the southeast side of town. And I asked them, what's the main thing I can do to help you? What do you need? Housing. Housing is the fundamental foundation of any healthy city. The other thing that is that they don't feel, they're disenfranchised. They don't feel as though they have a voice. We have committees like CUDE that talk about facades on buildings and things like that, and that's great. We're going to have a diversity officer coming in. What I would suggest is we give people that don't have a voice, that are disenfranchised, that feel discriminated against, a seat at the table. Let's get together a little committee or a committee that actually meets and can talk to the city, just like all the other little committees like CUDE. We need to give them a voice, and we need to give the people who feel disenfranchised role models that they can follow.
Thank you, Mark. Michael?
All right. Once again, Breonna Taylor, I'm going to say her name, didn't receive justice. And it's something we see time and time again. And that's why those of you who have involved in social justice movements, you see me at your events now, and you see me at your events when I'm not running for office. Your voice matters. I care about what you have to say. If you care about social justice, the foundation is still managing resources well and addressing sprawl, so you have the resources to address these other things. Among the many steps that we are taking, we fought a very long battle to make sure that one of the 4 pillars of our comprehensive plan that was updated after 40 years was equity. That was a fight on the city council, and we won, and that stands. We have now funded, even though the city budget's going down by 17% next year, and almost every property in Rochester is going to see a property tax cut next year, we still funded a director of inclusion and equity because it is a priority now in the city of Rochester. We have increased the WMBE standards to meet state level guidance for what is appropriate for Rochester. We want to create city pathways to diverse employment within our organization. We want diverse boards. We want to address issues like transportation and childcare for our board members. I fought for years with the previous mayor to ensure that equity and inclusion was a part of our boards and commissions, and now we're winning that battle under the new mayor. I support ranked choice voting, which elevates the voices of minorities and people who are typically disenfranchised. I helped write the Fair Redistricting Act with Nick Campion, who's going to help make sure that we have fair districts at all levels. I helped write the Transparency Act with Nick Campion and pass that, and that means that all of our information is accessible to all people in Rochester. I believe in equitable access to parks and trails and have been a leader in that regard. I believe in safe walking and biking routes. It's incredibly important for our community. I fight the over-criminalization of issues like homeless or just having the act of sitting in the skyway suddenly become a crime. DMC has a special role in all of this. This question was about DMC and in particular, how we create public spaces to be welcoming and inviting for all. And most importantly, transit, because that is a great equalizer for all these issues. That's where DMC and the DMC EDA have to lead on these issues.
Thank you, Michael. The next question, and Michael, this will start with you, is also from the Social Justice and Social Services Action Team. What would you do specifically to address the homelessness issue in our city?
Homelessness is an issue in Rochester, and it's an issue all around the country, and nobody has really figured out the perfect answer to this. So it is a problem, and I want to acknowledge that it's a problem. It's also one of those issues that we need to acknowledge who the lead agency is on it and what our role is. And the lead agency on this is the Olmsted County HRA, and our role is to provide them as much support as we possibly can. The Olmsted County HRA must continue to lead on this issue because they have the resources of the county that deals with a lot of issues related to homelessness. I am incredibly excited that one of the projects coming forward deals with hard to house housing populations down off of Mayowood Road. That's the kind of thing that wouldn't have happened in the past. The Olmsted County HRA has really stepped up. It is critically important that we fund, zone, and permit ways of getting affordable housing. We can't have one neighborhood after the next give the reason why we can't do reasonable development on an empty piece of land. It's just critical to who we are. We have to remove those obstacles or else we won't get those housing units created. We have to focus on county aid for homelessness and not police action. This is a big deal in my last term that I fought against the criminalization of homelessness. This is an issue all over the country. When we've had to clear some homeless camps, we've done it through social service agencies, and we've only had the police on backup. We're not making things like sitting in the skyway a crime, and that's important to treating these people with dignity and respect because they are our peers, they are our friends and neighbors, they are our loved ones that are going through challenging times. It starts with respect for them. Lastly, some of the investments that we are making with our county colleagues in terms of a day center, which we've had at Mayo Civic Center, and overnight housing for the homeless. We must continue to invest in these things, and there is no better example in the city of Rochester for how you treat the homeless with dignity and help them out than the incredible work done with the Rochester Public Library, and I stand wholeheartedly in support of their mission.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you. There is a plan out there, and as a matter of fact, I got a question from somebody last night on this. There's a Olmsted County, Rochester City plan to help the unsheltered homeless. And Again, I can't do it any justice in 2 minutes, but we need a county-city collaboration to make sure this plan gets implemented, which entails things like rapid response teams that can keep an eye on the homeless, get them into housing when they need to. We also need to address making sure that they get into warming shelters, the resources that they need. But it's also a housing issue. This whole talk of transportation and density downtown has a really negative side effect or unintended consequences that I was told that the rents in some of these places that are just awful have doubled, and that's because we're gentrifying downtown. If we were to create housing outside of downtown and level the playing field and build housing of all types everywhere, bring down the rents and the cost of housing lower, that will help everybody. But right now we're on the hairy edge of having people who are right one paycheck away from the street actually getting onto the street because we're causing housing downtown to be too expensive. The transportation system doesn't help these people get to their jobs because they don't have jobs downtown. It doesn't help. My wife works with somebody who is a lunch lady and she makes a very small amount of money. She can afford to live on the north side of town, but she has to spend 2 hours on a bus to get to the south side of town. So it's a very, very complicated problem that has a lot of facets to it. And I would ask you to go to my website so that I can show the details of this county city plan. It's a good plan and we really need to tackle it. There is no perfect solution. It's a tough problem, but we don't do it by making housing more expensive.
Thank you, Mark. We'll move now to 2 questions from the Age-Friendly Community Action Team. And Mark, the first one will go to you. We know from surveys that a majority of Rochester residents prefer to live in walkable neighborhoods that offer a mix of housing and transportation options and are close to jobs, schools, shopping, entertainment, and parks. These preferences, coupled with the rapid aging in the Rochester population overall, and the decrease in households with children, will continue to boost the demand for smaller homes in more compact neighborhoods. As small houses or apartments that exist on the same property lot as a single family residence, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, can play a major role in serving housing needs. Do you support accessory dwelling units or ADUs as an affordable housing option? And how do current Rochester ordinances provide for ADUs? And are you satisfied with that these ordinances are sufficient?
Okay, that's a lot of questions within a question. Short answer is ADUs are very important. I love the generational aspect of building basically a little apartment in the back of your house, and so the grandparents can take care of the kids while the parents go to work. It's great. I would just hope that when these were made, that we would basically cut back if we want to do that, we need to cut all the red tape. We need to make permitting online and faster and easier if we want to make this a reality. But you talked about little houses and walkable neighborhoods. It's true, some want that. A lot of people also want different kind of housing. Millennials are moving out of downtown in droves. They want elbow room and single family homes. So there is a mix of desires. And if we had actually done housing properly over time and created the housing that people want, from small houses to bigger houses, there would be less of a demand for these units because we have a housing crunch. They're great ideas. I'm wholeheartedly for it. We just have to make sure that when people want to build these, we don't make it such an odious process that they just throw their hands in the air.
Thank you, Mark. Michael?
Do I support ADUs as an affordable housing option? Yes, I do. And in fact, we've included it in the comprehensive plan that we helped to update. And more importantly, some of the new zoning techniques that we have, like R2X and TOD, and these are zoning districts that I support, but not everyone here does. And what I would say is that we need to make this a citywide option. And here's again where you have to be able to fight the NIMBYism, the not in my backyard mentality, and say that we can do this in one place and not the other. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if this is a good community solution, we need to be fair and equitable about it everywhere. I fully expect that we move towards a unified development code, which we are working on actively right now, that this is going to become largely available citywide. And there's fantastic ways of doing this. You can do what's sometimes referred to as a granny flat, which is a piece of land that might be sitting out back that you build on a small apartment, or you can even do it within the existing structure. They're both good ways of doing it. One of the key nuts and bolts things, because this really comes down to execution, is making sure that you can use use the same utilities to access both units, and that's something that we are addressing at the city level. This has the ability to not only address affordability, but also some lifestyle extension issues with senior housing, because I think there's a lot of situations where both young people can benefit from affordable housing, but seniors can perhaps benefit from having somebody who's there who they don't need that full-time 24/7 support, but every now and then to have a helping hand to help them with some basic issues. That might mean they can live independently for 5 or 10 years. And the only way that we're going to be able to provide the amount of senior housing that we're going to need is some of these creative options. So not only am I supportive of ADUs, I've been a leader on the topic, and we're already working on the nuts and bolts to make this available citywide.
Thanks, Michael. And again, Michael, this next question will start with you, and it's also from the Age-Friendly Community Action Team. In addition to making a difference in the community, civic participation helps individuals stay connected, one of the fundamental principles of healthy aging. A recent survey by the In the City for Good's Age-Friendly Action Team found that 97% of the respondents agreed that opportunities for older adults to participate in decision-making bodies is important. However, only 38% agreed that older adults in Rochester had these opportunities for civic participation. Participatory budgeting is a democratic process in which community members decide how to spend part of a public budget, giving people real power over real money. Would you support neighborhood-level participatory budgeting projects as an opportunity to promote civic participation and empower neighborhoods to participate in their own development?
Okay, and first of all, in answering that, I see what's going on here. You told them they had to limit it to 2 questions, and then they managed to get the 17 questions down into 2 questions. So I'm not fooled here. I know what's going on.
I'll
do my best to answer all of those 17 questions. I like to meet folks where they're at, and one thing that's been a little bit eye-opening to me and been a great experience is I go out to 125 Live, and I lead a senior-friendly bike ride around our community once a week. And I also take the time, when we're not in COVID times, of visiting some care facilities. I've made a lot of friends throughout the community, and I offer public gatherings in accessible locations and respond to folks when they contact me and set up meetings at their discretion. There is no better form of civic participation than just having your elected official be as responsive as I am to them and meeting them where they're at. In terms of participatory budgeting, we're actually piloting that a little bit right now with our neighbors, and we have these neighborhood grants that we've been doing, and that's been really a fantastic outcome for a lot of neighborhoods. But that in and of itself is not necessarily equitable, because we don't have equitable access to neighborhood associations. The ability to participate in these associations is often a point of privilege. The process needs to be smart enough to account for some of the quieter or disenfranchised votes. Our neighbors program is a good start, but we need to figure out how to get this into all neighborhoods who maybe don't have the free time and the folks living there or the privilege to create these organizations and devote time to them. We're using tools now like Polko, which helps us reach out in the community, and we can disaggregate some of what we're hearing from the communities that participate a lot and don't participate as much. And we're learning a lot about how we can be better in those ways. Ultimately, to be successful as a community, we have to take the, you know, the 90% of the community who are not insiders and give them the same respect that we have for some of the boys downtown who write the big checks for campaigns. And I really think that we're moving in a positive direction in doing that.
Thank you, Michael. Mark?
Hi, yeah, in terms of the disenfranchised, there are a lot of disenfranchised citizens in Rochester. When I was walking around with Jackie Booth and Crystal Smith and some of these housing areas, they kept on saying, go vote, go register to vote. And a lot of it was like, well, why bother? They don't have a voice. They don't feel like they have a voice. And the Our Neighbors initiative is great, but we need to provide a voice for everyone. In terms of being civically engaged, obviously it matters a lot to me. I'm running for city council. And I believe that, you know, we have referendums. That's why either Michael or I will be elected, is where their voice. But we need to make sure we go out and actually listen to what they want, and not have things like NIMBYism thrown around as some ideological war cry to do what I want. We need to actually listen to people, and that's the first thing. And I'm all for civic engagement. I would love to talk to people. I have talked to people. And the other thing that we can do to help get people plugged in is, and I mentioned this on a Facebook video, is we could have apps that push out information to anybody who wants to have that information. You know, you can look down and see, oh, we're going to talk about the fact that the Silver Lake Dam is going to get knocked down and the Silver Lake will be drained. I want to be civically engaged. I want to go talk about that. There are things that people just don't even know about, but would go talk to their representative about if they knew what was going on.
Thanks, Mark. You guys seem to be able to handle these dense questions, so. The next set of questions come from the Education Action Team. And Mark, the first one goes to you. How can the City Council and Rochester Public Schools work together to best serve our city's children and youth? For example, could we begin putting more basketball courts and similarly relative low-cost recreational facilities into our city parks?
Well, yeah, I mean, we definitely need to have a place where kids can go play and interact and learn those, learn socialization. And I'd like to see that as a sort of very multicultural interaction. So, you know, park locations are important. And the more people, it starts with our kids. And so we want our kids interacting, competing. We definitely need that. It's very important. But we also need to have a healthy respect for the Rochester School District leaders and not dictate to them where they build their schools, or put them down, or create animosity between the city and the school board. That's an issue that a lot of people have talked to me about. We need to have a good collegial relationship with them. They also need to be included in the comprehensive plan for growth, which they have been completely left out. One of the first things I'd like to do, if I am fortunate enough to get elected, is to have the city staff sit down with the school district and get them in that plan. Right now, they're kind of flapping in the breeze.
Okay, thanks. Michael?
So one of the great things about politics is sometimes the first thing to go in the heat of the campaign is sometimes the truth, and you hear some silly statements being made. So, you know, if you ever hear anyone saying that they're going to drain Silver Lake by taking out the dam, you can know that you're probably hearing something that's both untrue and pretty ridiculous. I would say that I think that I try to lead by example in terms of my collaboration with the school board. A lot of you have come to my public coffees over the years, and boy, for almost a decade, we've had a school board member there and a county commissioner, and we talk through these issues. It's pretty open and honest. One of the great things when we did with our comprehensive plan is we had thousands of hours of targeted community engagement. And we made sure all of these meetings in terms of taking input was very much public. So, you know, the school district and the superintendent, they had access to all these meetings. And I wish we had done more to encourage them to participate, but we made sure through the entire process they had access, and we figured out there were places we could grow and not grow. There has to be a little bit of mutual respect. And I think what you have to remember is it's not about elected officials necessarily doing what makes each other happy, because that's not who we're supposed to be serving. When it comes to schools, we're talking about the youth of the community. We're talking about people who rely on education. We're talking about people who rely on schools a lot more for education. What we have to care about is serving those kids. That's what's important. So as we locate schools, we have to figure out if the tax base can support the infrastructure. We have to figure out what the transportation costs are. We have to figure out if racial inequities are going to drive increased transportation costs, meaning that we get even further from giving our middle school and high school kids healthy start times. It has to be an open conversation. And I think that just as we have made our meetings open and available to the public, the school district needs to go further and make their meetings, like things on school siting, also open to the public, because to this point, this hasn't happened. But ultimately, my commitment is not to the school board, because I don't serve those folks. I have a lot of respect for those folks, but I serve the kids of this community, and that's what's important to me.
Thank you, Michael. And a second question from the Education Action Team, and this one goes first to you, Michael. Related to the first question, what should we be doing related to public pools? Do we need to close the Silver Lake pool? And if so, should we replace it? Should it be replaced by a pool in the same location or another part of the city, or with a water park kind of facility?
Well, and this is where it comes into what your priorities are. But one of the first things I like to point out, if we truly want to have citizen boards, we have to respect the work of citizen boards. And the Parks Board has done a lot of work in creating a master plan. And what their master plan has said is, over time, because we have two very aged pools that are expensive to maintain and really past the end of their lives. And what they've said is they want to close the Silver Lake pool and replace it with a destination splash pad at that location, but additional splash pads throughout the community. Our two pools are relatively close to one another. They're both pretty easily accessible from the downtown, and there's huge parts of the community that don't have access to that kind of recreation in the summer. We know that we can cost effectively operate a series of splash pads around the community for far less, and the capital costs are probably far less than maintaining that existing pool. So while nobody likes to hear potentially that a pool like that might be gone, I have to defer to the citizens who we've empowered to lead the park board and say, this is what they're recommending is in our best interest. I think they have some good ideas behind it, but irrespective of whether you want the pools, the splash pads, or some combination thereof, we need to have the resources to do the capital funding. And that's why it's so important. I encourage everyone to vote yes on the parks referendum question, because that's what's going to help get a lot of this stuff done. Ward 2 has been taken care of incredibly well with the park investments we have. I've poured my heart and soul into making sure we have great parks here. The entire community deserves the kind of progress we're seeing in Ward 2.
Okay, Michael. Mark?
Yeah, I also agree that we need to vote yes on the referendum for the parks. The parks are definitely underfunded. My understanding is the Silver Lake pool really isn't as bad a shape as made out to be. For example, the pool downtown. And so I do have a healthy respect for citizen boards. I wish that the Rochester Civic Theater Board had been shown a little bit more of a healthy respect. That's also a very important we have downtown. But we just need to put more money into our parks, period. And I would rely on some of the experts on the park board to give the information to me and listen to both sides and figure out what to do. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, Mark, were you done or cut off?
I'm sorry, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the list of questions from our action teams that were submitted to the candidates in advance so that they could prepare a response. We did get quite a few questions actually from the community. And so we'll begin to use the rest of our time that's to offer up some of those. These are questions that the candidates have not seen in advance. The first is, I think, a COVID's impact question having to do with transit. Transit is a huge issue in Rochester, with small and large employers relocating many employees to working at home. What impact in the next 5, 10, 20 years will working from home have on the projected use of transit, and especially rapid transit, transit villages, et cetera, for Rochester? Should the transit program be placed on pause for several years, or should it proceed as planned? And this first one goes to you, Mark.
All right. Yeah, it's the 17 questions in one.
And we didn't write those. This is actually coming from real people.
I'm impressed. Well, you know, that's the great unknown. I think we live in a brave new world where a lot of people are going to just be kind of working from anywhere. And it does kind of beg the question of, you know, how many people we need to pump into downtown. And I think that needs to be looked at very carefully. And rapid transit in general, I mean, we're standing shoulder to shoulder, and I think that people are pretty leery of that and will be for a while. You know, we don't know if a COVID vaccine is going to be effective. It's going to be a yearly thing. I mean, you know, so there's that as well. And there's a few things in the transit plan that I have questions about. For example, if we do turn our downtown into a little Minneapolis, what about all the spouses that don't work downtown, that have jobs outside of downtown? You know, I didn't see anything in the transit plan that addressed, you know, two-way traffic on peak times. Maybe they'll all work from home in their apartment buildings. I don't know. But I believe we need to, I don't know if we need to stop it for a while, but we definitely need to hit the pause button and rethink things and answer some questions that address the need for such a large, expensive, rapid transit system.
Okay, Mark. Michael?
Well, this is an issue that hands down we are very different on, and we've expressed this in previous forums as well. I am fully behind our efforts to continue and complete our $120 million rapid transit system along 2nd Street. Ward 2, which we will represent, is certainly probably the biggest beneficiary of this, along with downtown. And it's incredibly important to realize how transformative this project will be. Where we have constraints right now are largely at intersections at 2nd Street, 6th Street, and Civic Center Drive, and US 52. This is thought out in such a way that's going to allow us to have additional downtown employment without necessarily having to over constrain those intersections. This is an opportunity to bring $120 million in capital investment and good jobs into this community at a time that we'll be recovering from COVID. That is a huge opportunity that I'm not willing to pass by. I also believe that we've worked for 6 or 7 years talking to the community about how we build the transportation system of the future. And this is what we came up with. Unless you believe the world is ending and our future is ending with COVID-19, now is the time to try and secure dollars from outside the community and make strong investments in our future. It's not just getting people in and out of downtown. The entire transportation system becomes far more efficient. We have the opportunity to create fare free transportation if we do this right, and that's a huge opportunity. You can say that COVID-19 is the antithesis of transit, but let's not kid ourselves. The country of Japan, which is far more reliant on public transportation and 12 times as dense as the US, never even shut down for COVID-19, and they've had hundreds of deaths from COVID as compared to our 200,000. There are smart ways to do this. I am committed to the promises we've made to the people of Rochester. I am committed to big projects and helping us recover from COVID-19, and this is a huge part of it.
Thank you, Michael. Second question from a community member has to do with property taxes. Some states allow senior citizens, wounded vets, and other disabled persons to have their real estate taxes frozen under certain circumstances. 6 states have property tax freeze programs that bar property tax increases for eligible individuals. These programs are usually an optional program for local governments. 10 states have assessment freeze programs that limit how much property values can increase in a year for tax purposes. Now, here's the question, just one. Would you support a similar program in Minnesota and or Rochester, since many states leave this up to a local option? Michael, I believe that goes to you first.
Well, I appreciate the question. I appreciate the sympathies towards what that's going for, but this is where your knowledge of the system has to come in a little bit. And that is absolutely not a power of a city or a city council in the state of Minnesota. It's not a city question.
And included in that is, would you support it in Minnesota? I mean, you guys advocate, so I guess, would you advocate for such a program in Minnesota?
Probably not. Give you the honest answer there. And what you get into is you get into generational tax warfare. The reality is there's a lot of expenses that go to senior populations that the state invests in, and whether it's senior care, nursing care, public transportation. Minnesota, I don't believe we should be in a race to the bottom. I don't want to have the tax rate of Mississippi or Alabama. The reality is Minnesota's always been a fairly high tax state. That's a little bit in our nature. I'm opposed to property taxes. I think it should be done more on income and sales taxes because they're far more progressive and equitable. But the reality is that we're a fairly high tax state, but whether you look at educational outcomes, quality of life, the ability of businesses to be successful here, Fortune 500 companies per capita, you look at it, we are an awesome state. And to be honest, that's because we do properly fund elements of government that other people look behind. I don't want to leave seniors behind when they need the state to be there for them. So I think it's a very short-sighted thing, but again, it's not a city issue.
Okay, Mark?
Right. It sounds good in principle, and I would just say everybody's property taxes are too high. Just because property values go up doesn't mean our property taxes do too. I mean, that's the county assessor's job, and we need to just get property taxes down for everybody equally. If we do need to honor our vets, though, and if there is a program out there that can help them, if they have medical issues or are wounded, it's important that we take care of the people that have protected and served this country. I don't know the program. I would have to do my research on it, but my feeling is that we need to help those who need help, but we all need our property taxes reduced. And part of the way we reduce our property taxes is stop stuffing everything into the downtown area and gentrifying and causing housing to become scarce and expensive.
Okay. The next question from a community member, and I believe this starts with you, Mark. The city now has the statutory right to set the speed limit on streets in Rochester. The original recommendations by the public works staff was 20 miles per hour on low traffic residential streets. Do you support a speed limit of 20, 25, or 30 miles, the current speed limit of 30 miles an hour on low traffic residential streets?
Well, we need to enforce it. We just need to enforce our speed laws. However, saying that, I drive very slow through my neighborhood. 20 is definitely safer, 25, 30, but it really becomes an enforcement issue. And I've seen some emails from within the police department that say, really, they can't enforce it. They're spread too thin. It would become an education thing. So, really what we need to do is self-police, really. If you see a lot of times in residential neighborhoods, when you see somebody whipping by your house, it's sometimes in your own neighborhood. Go up and knock on the door and say, cut it out. And right now, there's going to be a cost associated with replacing all the signs or whatever. But, practically speaking, people just need to use their heads and drive appropriately, and the police need to enforce the law.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, Here's another issue where we differ fairly substantially in that I am a big believer in the professionalism and the competence of staff in their areas of expertise. So when things come up that are perhaps controversial in the community, I look to what the experts have to say. For example, that's why I supported the masking mandate for the city of Rochester, whereas other folks opposed it. When it comes to traffic, you can say enforcement is the biggest thing, but that previous comment about lowering everyone's property taxes, the biggest bulk of our property taxes go to law enforcement, and that's been increasing over the years. And the amount of money to enforce your way to lower speeds is insurmountable. It can't happen. When you're talking about speeds, what you're really talking about is the design of the roadways, and the design has to be better. And, you know, we can do things like I worked very closely with the Falwell Neighborhood Association over 14 months when we were working on the Berkman project, and we made some changes to both present and future changes to how 15th Avenue Southwest would operate to reduce neighborhood traffic and slow it down. If you look at some of the changes going on in Kutzke, those roads are designed for lower speeds. We're doing a sewer project near 7th Avenue. Design is the key. So irrespective of where we set the speed limits, we need to ask our engineers to design our neighborhood roads slower. I'm fine with 20. I'm fine with a compromise that would be elsewhere, but I think a lot of folks are thinking that it's 20 miles per hour everywhere. And they don't realize that doesn't necessarily apply to the major roadways. It doesn't apply to county or state highways. This is really talking about your neighborhood roads and cul-de-sacs where that it really is a realistic speed. You know, I'm seeing the yard signs pop up all over the community that people respect, that slower is safer. It has the support of AARP, it has the support of our staff. I want to do something that's going to keep people safe, because I've seen firsthand what happens to speeding drivers. I nearly lost my life previous May when a driver sped through a stop sign, and you know, it's a real issue. It's the one of the top complaints we get in terms of public safety in the city of Rochester. So yeah, I'm supportive of listening to what professionals have to say and figuring out how we do this, and including enforcement, design, and signage as part of the solution.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. This is kind of an interesting one. It's kind of I guess a governance question. Both of the current candidates for the council member at large position appear to be advocating for an enhanced role for the president of the council. What do you think the appropriate role for the president of the council is? And would you support enhancing that role, granting it more influence and authority? And we'll start with Michael.
No. And let me be very clear. I've spent a lot of the last 12 years diminishing the powers of the council president to what they should be. It is one of 7 seats. It's not even called the council president. It's called the council member at large. If we want to change that, it goes through the city charter, which is going to require a vote of the population or a unanimous city council. And so long as I'm on the city council, there will not be a unanimous vote on something like that. So this is people need to look at what they're signing up for when they run for these offices. But the reality is, if the council president truly had additional powers beyond that of the other council members, I might have seriously considered running for that position instead of Ward 2. I think the Ward seat is a little bit more humble of a seat to sit in. I don't think it necessarily gets the attention, but when it comes to making policy, these Ward seats are hugely important. Literally, the only difference in normal times between the council ward members and the council president is that they preside over the meeting. That is it. Outside of the meetings, there is no additional power. There's no additional authorities. That's the way our charter reads. If they want additional powers, they're going to have to go through the charter commission. In the meantime, I want to do the best that I can with a council of 7 equals.
Mark?
Yeah, hi. I think the role of a council president really is just to run a tight ship, get everybody on the same page. I don't know if they need a bigger hammer to do that. I do think it's important that the council at large be able to triangulate on partisanship and, put that to the side and actually have a little bit more of a collegial and healthy debate. And so really their job is to also, they look after the city. They have city concerns. We have ward concerns, although of course we too look after the city as well. And so they're supposed to be the people that just kind of help us all work together as a team. And if there is somebody out there that's not playing and being a good team member and it's hurting the city, I believe that the city council or the member at large should be much more vocal about squashing that. So that is one thing I would hope to see from the new council president.
And that concludes our questions. We want to have time now for closing statements. We had one additional question than we anticipated. So in terms of the rotation, Mark, you would be the first to give the closing statement. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I have been extremely passionate about running for this seat. I've spent 6 months thinking through very carefully a lot of these positions. My opponent and I definitely see things through a different lens, but if you go to markbransford.com, you'll see my thoughts, my details, and these things are born of a lot of time thinking, reading, talking to people on both sides of the issue. And if I'm elected, I will continue to pour blood, sweat, and tears and hard work into being the Ward 2 representative. I'm not a politician. I'm an advocate. And I'm looking to serve the community and not necessarily the city. We hear downtown, 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 city, city. People feel left out right now. Almost everybody actually everybody I've talked to, their main concern is the city council is tone deaf. They're not being listened to. And right now there's a situation in Pill Hill where people aren't being listened to and they're angry about it. And there's two sides to every issue, not one. I will not let my ideology influence my decisions because sometimes the citizens, your constituents who you work for, should trump your own thoughts and your own decision. You have to take it all together in one package and make a decision. I will give it my all, my all. I will work hard, diligently, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Michael, your closing?
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to watch this. One of the upsides of COVID has been there have been so many forums with so much great information. I encourage you to watch this. I want everybody to be an informed voter. I want you to know where we all stand on the issues. That's why I'm linking all of these forums at votewojak.org as well. And I'm posting my answers to questions there as well. I'm putting my platform clearly up there. So when there's controversy like these, this potential issue on Pill Hill, I'll tell you exactly where I stand. I'll tell you whether or not I believe the law should apply equally to all people, or if we should make certain exceptions in certain areas. I can answer those questions directly. You don't have to wonder that about me. One of the things I'm proudest about in this campaign is that I've been endorsed through a competitive process by the Sierra Club, and that is my dedication to both a healthy and sustainable environment and social justice. I know that we all care about these issues. This is hugely important, and the fact that my peers who care so deeply about these issues saw fit to endorse me is incredibly important. We don't talk enough in these forums about just what it takes to do the job. I know how hard it is. Come January 1st, I'm going to have 12 years of experience. The other 7 elected officials serving the city of Rochester are going to have a combined 12 years of experience. That is huge. I'm able to bring knowledge, stability, and a history of tremendous success and accomplishment, getting great things done, whether it's neighborhood enhancements, Cascade Lake Park, biking and walking trails, neighborhood redevelopment, successful public works projects, and just responsiveness. It takes 40 to 60 hours a week to do this job responsibly. I realized that early on. I had to take my personal business and set that aside. We need to be asking every person running for office, are you going to quit your current job? Are you going to go down to halftime? How are you going to devote the time to do what people need you to do? It's a big commitment. That's why we're trying to make equitable, have some compensation out there so people can do this job. One thing you know about me is I always have that passion. I always have that heart. I'm always there responding to you, giving you the honest answers and not necessarily the answers that you want to hear. I'm here to serve the community. I'm here to serve you. Thank you for your vote, hopefully well before November 3rd.
Okay. I want to thank Mark and Michael for participating on our forum this evening, and for those of you who've joined us on Zoom and have looked in on Facebook. A reminder, we're recording this evening, and the recording will be available from our YouTube page sometime tomorrow morning. Candidates are linking to these forums, and so you can access them often from their websites. I encourage you to visit the websites that Mark and Michael have referenced. Both are providing, or in their way, information to help you understand their positions and make a decision accordingly. In the City for Good, it was founded on the notion of civic participation and civic governance. And certainly there are those of us in our community who take on special roles in that regard. And those are people who serve and who seek to serve. And so we always appreciate their service and certainly appreciate their participation in our forums around election time and then in between elections, when we often invite them to come and speak to members of the community. We'll start. So thank you both. You're welcome to stay around for the Ward 3 candidates. I'm sorry, Ward 4 candidates. I noticed that Kelly and Katrina are already here. We'll be starting that. We said we'd start at 7:35, and so we'll take about a 5-minute break and allow people who are planning to show up then to do that. And we'll continue the live streaming on Facebook, and we'll just continue recording through this pause. So Katrina and Kelly, let me get you set up. There you are, Kelly. So I've invited you both to unmute.
Hello.
There you, hi, Nancy. Okay, so we'll get started at 7:35. I think you all saw how we do it. We'll start. I have a brief opening. We're foregoing opening statements from the candidates and providing you with, as we let you know, a 2-minute closing. You've got about six questions from our action teams, and we'll go through those. And then with the time remaining, as you heard, we have some questions from the community, and we'll do as many of those as we have time for, and then your closing statements. Perfect. So we will stare at each other. I'm gonna shut my camera off for a moment and be back, and we'll start at 7:35.
Okay.
Kelly, are you with us? Kelly? It looks like she might be having some difficulties.
Yeah, she must be.
I'm here.
Okay. Is your camera working?
Yep.
There we go. Okay. Welcome, Katrina and Kelly. Welcome everyone. This is the In the City for Good candidate forum for city council candidates. And these are the candidates for Ward 4. There are no incumbents. This is an open seat. So both of them are hoping to fill the seat that I believe was Mark Bildebach's seat in Ward 4, and he retired. Your microphones have been muted and the chat room is closed. We are streaming live on our Facebook page. This forum is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube page tomorrow morning. My name is Dave Beal. I'm your host and a member of In the City for Good. In the City for Good is a grassroots organization formed in 2015 in response to the challenges and opportunities of growth in Rochester, with the belief that all residents should share in the responsibilities and benefits of that growth. Our members are organized into action teams that meet regularly to promote well-informed citizens and the participation in civic governance. We host several public forums on local issues each year. This is our third round of candidate forums. We can be reached at inthecityforgood@gmail.com. Though we believe there is value in witnessing candidates think on their feet and measure their off-the-cuff familiarity with issues, we think it's also useful to hear from them on questions they've had an opportunity to think about. With that in mind, each year we have provided candidates with questions prepared by our action teams. Each group has submitted 2 questions. For each question, candidates were asked to prepare a 2-minute response. Each candidate in the forum will be asked to reply to the same question. We have also invited the community to submit questions, and we will include those as time permits. Candidates have also been given 2 minutes for closing remarks. They may use that time as they choose. We'll go through our questions and we'll rotate. We'll start alphabetically. So Kelly, that means the first question will come to you. And this first question is from our housing group. What do you see as your role in seeking out solutions and options for affordable and accessible housing in Rochester?
Thanks, Dave. I see my role as a council member working on housing issues as sort of an aggressive role. I want to aggressively seek solutions to our housing shortage. I believe we're about 15 years behind in working on providing housing for our workforce and our residents. I want to engage with the residents, realtors, and city staff to seek out information that's available locally, as well as in other geographical areas, so that we can really learn the best way to prioritize this item. And we need to move towards achieving our goal in eliminating the housing shortage. It's also council members' function, I believe, to address the priority items in an effective way and ensure that we handle this appropriately, and it needs to be followed through on and implemented properly. The fact that we are about 15 years behind in housing is pretty uncomfortable to handle when we consider the growth that our city has gone through recently and that it is potentially planning on going through in the future.
Thanks, Kelly. Katrina?
So this is incredibly important. Affordable housing. How do we get there? Right now, we are missing the entire gap between when you are able to rent and buy a home. Right now, in order to afford a home, it's $250,000+ in most cases in Rochester right now. And that whole middle gap, that $100,000 range is missing, and we need to get it back. A lot right now comes down to starting at the top of the process. We need to bring together our developers, our builders, and our city and work together. We need to find a solution that benefits everybody. It starts with the developers. Their fees, some of the restrictions, there's certain types of homes right now that we can't build in Rochester because of lot restrictions and zoning laws. Those can be changed, and we can build smaller homes that are good for our elderly community, smaller homes that are great as first-time home buyer homes, and a program. There are incentives, CETA and a few other organizations do it in communities outside, in rural communities right now, outside of Rochester. We need to create some programs here in town. We can create and incentivize different types of development and also programs to help people get into those homes that are first-time home buyers or looking for other options. So biggest thing, come together. We need to talk to our developers. We need to talk to our builders. We need to work as a team, as a city. We need to find new ways to minimize some of these restrictions that are inhibiting them from developing different areas. And we definitely need a mix of homes right now. We need a mix, and that's the biggest struggle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of housekeeping. Kelly, if you can go ahead and leave your mic on. So we won't know having to mute and unmute. So
If my dog starts barking,
oh, I appreciate that, but I will have to turn it back on, so I'll try to keep an eye on that. So okay. Well, the next question is also, the second question is also from the housing group, and Katrina, this goes to you first. Many solutions have been proposed to address the lack of affordable and accessible housing in Rochester. Which solutions do you support and why?
The main solutions are going to be, like I said, it's going to come down to rezoning, looking at the top, looking at the fees that we had put on and that our developers incur. We need to minimize some of those, find new solutions. Back in the 80s and 90s, you were able to get water and sewer hooked up as a developer for free or at little cost. And then slowly fees have came up, and they've just continued to rise every year. And I think this year is a great year to just stop, refocus, bring everybody together. We can, as a city, find a solution. We can create some of these programs that have already been done in the past. It's not that we have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to stop and refocus. We're in an incredible housing shortage. And like, Kelly had said, we're welcoming new people into our community every day. Mayo, DMC, everybody expects us to have an influx coming into our community, and we don't have the homes to support it. Whatever it takes, we need to come together. We need to find solutions. And like I said, it's going to take a team, because it takes RPU. It takes all these different boards to sit down together. It takes the city. It's going to take our developers and builders to find out where they're really struggling and what restrictions are holding them up from being able to develop the different types of homes in our community that we need, and find a solution together.
Okay, thank you. Kelly.
Thanks, Dave. So the first question was what our role is, and the second question is what do we support? What solutions do we suggest? And as I stated before, we're about 15 years behind, I think. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic and our supply chains being reduced, building material procurement a little shaky this year, our economy is being steered into sort of uncharted territory. I support, like I said, an aggressive program that will seek out existing developed properties for multifamily structures to be built. I also support policies that incentivize zoning changes and allow for ADUs being built on divided lots to increase density in specific neighborhoods that can carry the additional housing capacity. I also support changing a portion of the larger rental units into purchasable condominiums, because not everyone wants to rent. And in a market like we have, renting is perhaps not the most prudent thing to do. Purchasing something right now is a far more prudent thing to do. So opening up some of our larger facilities for purchasing might be a really great way to get someone in the door to something that's less expensive. I also think that inclusionary zoning, although it has its merits, there are components of this zoning that need to be challenged. And of course, TIF, the tax increment financing, could be utilized, although it is probably reaching the end of its life. It can be used appropriately to serve all of our citizens, not just low income or high income, but everybody in between if we fill out that form, that application correctly. So zoning, taking advantage of developed empty lots, accessory dwelling units, adding purchasing of units in larger rental spaces. There's a host of things that we can do, a lot of tools that we have that we can pull out of our toolbox to incentivize adding more starter homes and homes for any income level really into our city.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. The next question, and Kelly, this will come to you first. The next set of questions come from the Social Justice and Social Services team. The first one of those is, what specific action will you propose to create a racially just city? What should DMC and the DMC EDA be doing to address these issues?
Thanks. First of all, racial inequity and justice is not about proposing. It's about the follow through that goes along with the proposal. And I think that's really key. We need to adopt changes and work towards the future that we all see that is equitable and just for our city. And so following that, we need to really look at our city policies and ensure that the wording and the protocols are really using that 21st century definition of equity and inclusion. But stopping there obviously isn't going to assure that these policies will be adopted and followed through on. Our end goal, of course, is that Rochester projects and all of the things that we do will move forward so that no one would be exempt from their usage. And the council should review and propose changes to suit community needs, not just organizations' needs. And we need to follow through on this. That's really the paramount piece, the key here. We cannot continue to let the residents down. And the city is our number one goal. Our number one goal in the city is to provide for our residents and the businesses, because they really are the foundation of our economy. So we need to put that together and make that change to equity and justice. As far as the DMC goes, they should plan for projects that fit all neighborhoods and all socioeconomic levels, not just to plan for luxury buildings in the downtown core or events and placemaking that promote higher income levels to engage. We need all of our residents and citizens to be engaged in the opportunities that are offered throughout our city. Leveraging their development and fundraising capacity would be really ideal here. Creating family-based multi-residential neighborhoods, value-added features such as daycares, groceries, and green spaces attached to new developments. I really think that's a way that DMC can show their commitment to our community, not just to the Mayo Clinic and infrastructure and the downtown core. So there needs to be more frequent review of the EEO as well. That data to ensure equity in employment across our city would be really helpful. Economic improvement should be a priority for all groups, and implementation of this, again, is very important. It's not just the proposal, it's the implementation as well. And really, there's no area in our city that should escape the scrutiny that we need to have to develop Rochester into the most equitable city in Minnesota. We have an obligation. Mayo Clinic has set the standard, and we can certainly uphold that.
Thank you, Kelly. Katrina?
So a racially just city, it comes down to a whole swarm of issues. The city right now is doing a good job of looking into the different options and different programs. They're implementing new things with our neighbors. They're implementing United Way is trying to put out some programs, Diversity Council, Rochester Initiative. They're all doing great things, and we just need to support them, and we need to make sure that their voices are being heard and that we're doing everything we can. The biggest thing that I hear working with a few of these nonprofits that work with children that are at risk, the number one concern is that they believe their voices aren't being heard, that people in our city council and in just city government in general all want to put a band-aid on the solution, but they don't actually want to get out, put themselves in their shoes, and sit down in their neighborhoods and have conversations. And I think the biggest thing is that we all just need to listen. We need to go and be a part of the conversations with them in their neighborhoods and understand what issues they're facing and what we can do to help. As far as DMC goes, DMC has been doing a few different things. The one that's the most interesting to me and that still needs a lot of work, they actually have changed some of their policies or made them a little bit more clear that 7% of hired companies need to be women-owned or minority-owned businesses. The great thing about that is that they're doing something. It's in the policy. They're in the right direction. The problem with it right now is that a big company comes in, bids on the projects, they win the bid. This XYZ company now gets to choose their subcontractors. There's nowhere out there that tells you who won that contract, what the name of that person is. So if you were a woman-owned or a minority-owned business, that you could reach out and you could get a hold of that company and let them know that you're here and you would like to be a part of that program. There's a gap, and that's the problem. We keep creating policies. I think people's hearts are in the right place, but the execution is lacking. We need to find, with this specific program, a way to educate the community and find ways to help keep that work here and make sure that when we are looking at these programs and trying to do things, that we're finding ways to uplift the people in our community. Those funds should be going to the women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses in our community. And young adults should know that they exist because it's a career path that maybe they didn't consider, and the funds are there. It's there for them and they need to be aware of it. That's one of the biggest things that I think DMC, right now I see a gap and we need to fix. And I think that we can all move forward. And I think people in this community have good hearts. Everybody's minds are in the right place. We just need to keep working hard and keep moving forward.
Okay, thank you. The second question from the Social Justice and Social Services Group, and Katrina, this will go to you first.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do specifically to address the homelessness issue in our city?
So this is actually one that has always been on the top of my to-do list. I actually spent 2 years working with homeless children in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school systems and kind of understand a little bit about what homelessness means and the issues that people face dealing with homelessness and generational poverty. First, and the most important thing is that we can't stop homelessness, but we can create a space for those that are experiencing homelessness, and more importantly, make sure that they have the resources available to help them combat homelessness and pull them out of homelessness or poverty. One of the biggest things that we can do is really making sure that we create that safe space. That's the one thing that for some reason Rochester is missing that a lot of other big cities and communities have. And when I grew up here, we had homelessness was here. It might not have been as visible as it is today. Today, it's definitely a lot more visible and known, and it's a bigger issue. And I think our city hasn't adjusted to help combat it. We need a safe space for them. We need a place that is known if somebody is facing hard times, that they can go, a single building that has all the resources in one place. Homelessness can mean so many different things. Some people fall into homelessness because they were born into it and never had the resources to pull themselves out of it. Some suffer from drug, alcohol abuse. Some suffer from mental health issues. Some just hit a rough patch in their life and need a helping hand. And no matter what the reason is, we need that safe room. We need a meal. We need social workers to help them that are there with them, mentors to guide them and to show them that they have other options, and experts to help uplift, and then also any other ways that we can find that will help combat homelessness within our community. There are solutions. Right now, I feel like we band-aid it a lot in the city. We create places that are temporary, and we need something more sustainable. And we need to just find a solution that isn't a temporary fix, that actually can house people and try to uplift people. And this can be used for a number of people in either below poverty or, like I said, facing homelessness.
Thank you. Kelly?
Thanks, Dave. So I believe that a city's role is to maintain the infrastructure to support the residents, the commercial establishments, and our visitors. And this should include viable housing policies and procedures for all people who reside here. Rochester has responded to this previously using various strategies, but of course, moving forward, we need to do something a little different. We continue to improve. We're doing the best that we can, but we need to make some improvements. We need to provide the housing where services are. When I was on the mayor's forum to talk about basically food access a couple of years ago, when she started her mayor's forum on homelessness, one of the factors that I had determined from working with my group was that about 5 blocks surrounding the downtown Salvation Army was really the ticket. Going much further than that, it stretched out too far for their ability to do what they needed to do. So the housing needs to be where the services are. Underlying factors of, substance abuse, mental health disparities, generational poverty, systemic poverty, these are all difficult to deal with without adequate supports. And just addressing homelessness itself won't work. So having a central location for services is great. We need to look at developed land parcels that already have services there, that we could potentially do some cottage residencies, specific neighborhoods that could be serviced easily close to our downtown area. We could also consider micro units from our hotel sources. These buildings exist already within a servicing network. Acknowledging DMC's influence on the city is really great. Their collaboration with both residents and developers is essential, and utilizing their skill set there could yield a more sustainable outcome for our unsheltered folks and future development surrounding this potential to eliminate homelessness. We should also incentivize the purchasing power of our lowest income residents. Many homeless individuals, they just want a space of their own, and they have the most to lose from the policies that we put in place, from poorly planned developments and inadequate supports. They really are the ones that are going to suffer the most. So we really need to think about this as a system, and there are many moving parts in this system. And finally, we really need to, just tying in with housing in general, we don't have an affordable housing issue, we have a housing issue. And so mid-rise buildings close to the core downtown that can preserve a lot of our green infrastructure would be really helpful. Who knows what the future holds, but being outside is one of the healthiest things we can do right now. And that may be the case, down the road for years to come. And so keeping our neighborhoods intact by avoiding the sprawl and going up closer to the downtown core would be great, because there's actually some residents that don't want their neighborhoods disturbed here. They want to stay in their neighborhoods without a lot of sprawling multi-level things.
Kelly? These next set of questions come from the Age-Friendly Action Team. And Kelly, the first one will come to you, and it's an issue that we've just been talking about, and relates to something that you brought up in an earlier question. We know from surveys that a majority of Rochester residents prefer to live in walkable neighborhoods that offer a mix of housing and transportation options, are close to jobs, schools, shopping, entertainment, and parks. These preferences, coupled with the rapid aging in Rochester, of the Rochester population overall, and a decrease in households with children, will continue to boost the demand for smaller homes in more compact neighborhoods. As small houses or apartments that exist on the same property as a single family residence, an accessory dwelling unit can play a major role in serving housing needs. Do you support accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, as an affordable housing option? And how do current Rochester ordinances provide for ADUs? And are you satisfied that these ordinances are sufficient?
Yes, I absolutely love ADUs. Accessory dwelling units are awesome. And they've been around in the city for, well, golly, probably close to 100 years, if not longer. Many of the older homes in our historic Southwest district have residences above the carriage house or the garage that was added. Unfortunately, many of those historic homes have had their lots divided, not to the best ability of the neighborhood and its aesthetic. Unfortunately, ADUs are only allowed right now in the R2X zoning, which is a specific core zoning that's changing mostly close in here. And our neighborhood was affected when the zoning came through this spring and the changes were proposed. But ADUs are a really great way to increase density, and it's not right for everywhere. And this is where I fall back on neighborhoods giving their feedback, and the city really needs to listen to its residents. But one of the key features of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance here is the architectural specificity of the building that you're adding. It needs to match the main house, the big house. You need to have the similar exterior facade, similar pitch to the roof, that kind of a thing. So we don't get a mishmash of housing. And this is particularly prevalent in the Southwest downtown area of our city, the historic Southwest section of town, where you see some of these really historic legacy homes that have been divided, and you've got a 1950s dwelling next to a turn of the century, early 1900s, 1920s dwelling. And it's kind of jarring to the eye. Yes, it's increased density, but when I lived in that neighborhood for over a decade, it was really important to me to see a somewhat of a homogeneity of architecture, because that's one of our really special areas of our town. And I think ADUs placed there need extra consideration, whereas ADUs placed in perhaps my neighborhood, it could be more easily done because we have increased density of houses already. So making sure that the factors for zoning are in place in areas where specific neighborhoods could handle the density is the key factor there. And then also the aesthetics, the way the ordinance is written now for aesthetics, I think is very good.
Thank you, Kelly. Katrina?
So I'm not sure who did the poll, but I think that we're not seeing a decrease with households with children, but actually seeing an increase moving to our community of families with children right now. And yes, I 100% do support any affordable housing option, and AUDs is another great option that needs to be looked at. Like Kelly said, right now it's limited on where you can do it in our city. Definitely, we need to look at being able to, anyone should be able to add a little mother-in-law suite. It's great could be for an elderly mom to come live in, or it could be another option for the young adult looking for a cheaper home or a room to rent per se. One of the biggest things that we need to do is listen. We need to listen to the communities, make sure that we're putting them in the right spot, but there's no reason that we can't do this throughout the community and open this up a little bit more than where it is currently. One of the biggest problems that we face with it right now is really the same problems that our builders face today in our city. To do an AUD, you have to pull permits like everything else. That takes time. Right now, it's written that you have to have separate sewer and water and separate meters ran to a home if you were to do something like this. One, that means tearing up your yard, your driveway. They have to come in and put in these new lines. Most people don't want to do that. And then on top of it, you have to pay all the fees, which by the time you are done adding up everything that it's going to take, SAC and WAC fees, you're probably around $30,000 for the most. That's give or take, but it's going to be pretty close to that. And who wants to deal with that kind of headache right now? We can, it's a simple fix. Just go with the same line. We don't need to have separate lines and meters. It can be hooked up to the same house. There could be water pressure issues, possibly, but that's an easy fix. You add a pump. There's different things we can do. I think it comes down to that. We need to lift the restrictions. We need to look at the fees associated with it and make sure that while we open it, that people can actually afford to do it, and it's an actual option that we look at into the future. So yes, 100% support them. I think they'd be great for a whole mix of people within our community.
Thank you, Katrina. A second question from the age-friendly community team, and Katrina, this goes to you next. And we do know where this survey came from. It came from us. So, in addition to making a difference in the community, civic participation helps individuals stay connected, one of the fundamental principles of healthy aging. A recent survey by In the City for Good's age-friendly action team found that 97% of the respondents agreed that opportunities for older adults to participate in decision-making bodies is important. However, only 38% agreed that older adults in Rochester had these opportunities for civic participation. Participatory budgeting is a democratic process in which community members decide how to spend part of a public budget, giving people real power over real money. Would you support neighborhood level participatory budgeting projects as an opportunity to promote civic participation and empower neighborhoods to participate in their own development? Katrina?
Yes, absolutely. I was actually just speaking to a couple people within our community kind of about this option. One of the problems, and right now, even our city council doesn't have much say in the budgets. We just vote on what is presented to us. So yes, the city administration is really the one who is in charge of writing our budgets. They're the ones who prepare it for the most part, and then it's presented to the city council to vote on. I would love to see somehow, some way, a plan where people from all walks of life can be, at least give input on issues and different things that they would like to see within the city, any changes before the budget is made. It really comes down to the administration listening too, not just city council. That's the one thing running for city council that I have learned, and I really wish people were more aware of, because we need to be more aware of. We are hiring a new city administrator. That person is the CEO of our town. They are the ones who set the budgets and who put together the plan, per se, on where our money goes. We vote on it as a city council, but we don't put that plan in place. We don't write out those numbers. So yes, they need to be more involved with the community directly. I think that there is a lot of different things that we can do. One of the other very interesting aspects that I've learned is that as a city council member, and once a budget is made, there's two departments, the library and the parks department. They're given the funds, and the city council votes on how much money they get, but has absolutely no say in how they spend that money. And that's something that was put into the governance a while back and written into charters. And I find it incredibly interesting, especially when one of those boards is asking for more money right now, and nobody has say in how that money is spent. They will tell you after it's spent where they spent it, but you have no say in how it's spent up front. More transparency is key. And I think any way that we can involve our community better in the decision-making before the decisions are made is 100% key.
Thanks, Katrina. Kelly?
Thanks, Dave. Yes, so I am all in participatory projects, and I'm all in with neighborhood level participation. This has been a really huge deal over here on the east side, navigating some of the changes that we've gone through in the last couple of years. Participatory involvement is so very important. It allows residents to have their viewpoints heard, but more importantly, people feel as though they're heard and that they're offering their experience and their feelings and thoughts on something moving forward. It actually engages citizenry to be a part of the future and being responsible and accountable for the changes that are made. That being said, your In the City for Good study really mimics what was found on the Polko study last year in the fall, where it said that 61% of the residents really don't feel like they're being communicated with well with the city administration. And then I think it was 30 or 33% of people felt that they just weren't engaged, that the city was doing, you know, an okay job. So if we can get citizens to become more engaged, to share their viewpoints, to work with each other on projects moving forward, I think we're going to see a real changer here in how our city moves forward. The individual nuances that happen in various neighborhoods are really pretty neat. And you might not know those subtle nuances if you don't get around from neighborhood to neighborhood. I think it's important that getting the trust from neighborhoods to the city, and then as well, the city administration or elected officials to the neighborhoods. I've had some difficulties in expressing the needs of our neighborhood with particular projects, and everything has come out very well. We've got a great rapport with the city officials. We've got a great rapport with the city administration right now. And I think that neighborhood input is really where we're going to be going to expand our city and how we're going to be moving forward. Well-informed city administration, well-informed city officials on hyperlocal issues is really important. And that's what's going to affect the local changes that are going to be happening in our city.
Thanks, Kelly. The next set of questions come from the Education Action Team, and these will be the last two questions that the candidates had ahead of time. And Kelly, I believe the first one goes to you. How can the City Council and Rochester Public Schools work together to best serve our city's children and youth? For example, could we begin putting more basketball courts and similar relatively low-cost recreational facilities into our city parks?
Yes, we could. Vote yes on the referendum. Everyone loves our parks. We have one killer basketball court at MLK Park, right on Center Street, just east of 15th Avenue. We have in the summertime, and even on these nice days here in autumn, we have close to 1,000 people using that basketball court per week. And I'm so thankful that the parks are putting in water. The basketball players have had to go a quarter of a mile away to the Olmsted Medical Center or to the Apollo station at the corner of 4th and 11th to get water because they don't have any water there. So I am all about getting courts put back into the schools. I'm all about getting courts put into some of our public parks. It's really a minimal piece of additional materials and supports that we can do to keep kids engaged, to keep them active, to increase their physicality outside. It teaches teamwork and it keeps them off the streets. It keeps kids from doing other things that might not be as healthy. So when I see all the people playing basketball here at MLK Park over here on the east side, I'm just happy. They're so engaged. And what it does is it increases it increases our diversity because we're interacting on a different level through sports and through play. And I think it's key that we get those basketball courts back on the schoolyards outside instead of just having large fields to run around on. We leave some balls laying around so anybody can play a game of pickup if they want. And I think it's also key that we put some hoop space in our public parks. However, I think we've got the knowledge to do this, to do the studies through Polco, to get the research done and get feedback on this. We don't need to hire any consultants to help us to make this decision. I think we have the capacity to make this decision on our own.
Thanks, Kelly. Katrina?
Can you repeat the question quick, Dave?
Sure. How can the City Council and Rochester Public Schools work together to best serve our city's children and youth? For example, could we begin putting more basketball courts and similar relatively low-cost recreational facilities into our city parks?
Okay, absolutely. Yes, we can do that. Right now, how do we support our youth? Our youth are struggling with distance learning and everything else going on. I mean, they're at home and they're looking for things to do. We lack things for young people to do in this town. We're growing and we really don't have enough. So absolutely, anything that helps keep them out of trouble and doing something, anything active, anything in this town would be helpful right now to a lot of our youth. and 100%. I employ normally pre-COVID about 45 youth, and love to hear their perspective on different things in this city, and they would all love more to do. Going forward beyond that, what else can we do? How do we move funds around to get them these resources? Parks and Recs does have a fund. They are budgeted into our 2021 budget. Is it enough? Probably not. They could definitely use more. One of the problems I see, I'm going to say no to the referendum because it raises taxes. And right now this year, everyone in the council has agreed that we do not need to raise taxes this year in our community. And in this last debate, I actually just heard Mr. Councilmember Wojak speak that we are going to get lower taxes next year. So I can't wait to see that. But if we say yes to this referendum, although it does give $2 million to our parks moving forward, we don't know. Like I said, you do not get to choose where that money gets spent. You do not get to say in how that money gets spent. You will get to see how it is spent after it is done. And that needs to be considered. And we also need to really consider, do we want our property taxes raised this year right now while we're trying to come out of so many other things? So moving forward, yes, we need more things for our youth, absolutely, in this town, and basketball hoops, anything at all that gives them more activities and choices.
Thank you, Katrina.
Yep.
We're coming up pretty close to our closing time, and I want to have time for your closing statements. And I think I would like us to get to at least one of the community questions. And so we'll move to that one for the final question to see where that leaves us in terms of time. Transit, and this comes from a member of the community, and I think both of you heard it because you were listening in on the last forum, but it's not one you were sent in advance. Transit is a huge issue in Rochester, with small and large employers relocating many employees to working at home. What impact in the next 5, 10, and 20 years will working from home have on the projected use of transit, and especially rampant transit villages, et cetera, for Rochester? Should the transit program be placed on pause, or should the transit program move forward as planned? Kelly, I believe that goes to you first.
Yes, thanks, Dave. I think portions of the transit plan need to move forward. I think it's a good plan. I think it's going to help air quality. I think it's going to help navigating people back and forth to where they need to go. However, a full-blown Western transit hub on the extreme west end of 2nd Street, maybe that's not the direction to go. Maybe we implement the buses, get the electric going, and work for it that way. I also think maybe starting out with smaller surface lots over on the eastern side, closer to East Circle Drive and 4th Street. There's some property and space available. I know if we could actually poll a lot of the Mayo employees that are living in Eota, St. Charles, coming from Winona, Chatfield, those people, maybe they would be more inclined to park on an eastern spot and then take an electric bus or a shuttle type of a vehicle into the downtown core. Also, there's the southern space for the transit hub. We've got a surface lot there now that's a great lot. I think that if we can do a small study with the beginnings of that, expanding where the lots are, expanding the routes, before we spend a lot of money into that really large facility on the west side, that might be prudent. And let's keep our eye on how many of these telecommuters continue to be telecommuters and how many of them actually come back to the downtown core. But moving in a positive direction to save energy, to cut down on the particulate in the air, I'm all for that. And I'm all for saving the money and proceeding slowly and carefully, because like I've said, economically, we're in pretty uncharted territory right now.
Kelly, I'm sorry, Katrina.
So the first part of it was, the impact. Do I think there's going to be an impact with people not working from home now and not coming into the city? Yes, absolutely. There's going to be an impact. And do we need to relook at our plan? Yes, we probably need to relook at our plan. We need to work with people at Mayo and try to understand how long they plan on keeping people at home, if this is permanent, if this is not permanent. I know they're shuffling things around a lot there, and it's definitely going to impact how we bus people around our city, or where we need buses, and that aspect of downtown and the traffic. So is Second Street still the option? I don't know. We don't know who's going to be on these buses anymore. We are still seeing the same amount of patients in town for the most part, but we're not busing workers back and forth like we had originally planned to be doing. Busing and transportation is also a huge issue with some of our neighborhoods here, and some of those who don't have cars and don't have access to transportation. And we need to make sure that we're talking with those people, and that as we look at our transportation plan, that we're thinking about them too, and how they access work and how they get from their home to their job, and that we're putting these bus stops and hubs, and our transit plan is still working for today's economy and the growth within our city.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question from the community. And maybe it's a pretty straightforward question. You might keep your answers brief, and then we'll go to closing statements. And again, this is not one you received in advance. The city now has the statutory right to set the speed limit on streets in Rochester. The original recommendations by the public works staff was 20 miles an hour on low traffic residential streets. Do you support a speed limit of 20, 25, or the current speed limit of 30 miles an hour on low traffic residential streets? And Katrina, this starts with you.
Yeah, so with this, I support what the neighborhood supports. It really comes down to their preference. In the end, is it necessary? I don't know. I don't like people to fly down my road. We all have cute signs out that say children playing here, and it sometimes slows people down and it sometimes doesn't. The issue that I see is the cost. We'd be spending all this money on new signage and trying to educate people. People are used to not paying attention to signs. I don't even know if there are signs necessarily anywhere in my neighborhood at all that lists the speed limit. So how would you know would be the next thing. And then, yes, I've heard everybody say, how do you enforce it? Same thing. I think it comes down to even knowing. Like I said, I don't think there's a single speed limit sign. I'm trying to think right now in my entire neighborhood. And if it was 20, I don't think anyone would know. I don't think anyone would drive any different. We've been trying to slow people down forever on my street. And it works some days and it doesn't work other days. I would leave it up to the neighborhood. If they see a huge problem on a certain street in their neighborhood, and the neighbors, the majority of them would love to see it lowered, I don't see it being a problem. So I think it's just a matter of listening to the neighborhood.
Okay, Kelly?
Thanks, Dave. I guess I'd like to see what this is going to cost for signage. Obviously, it doesn't need to be done everywhere. I trust Public Works on this one. I think they've got a great idea, and I happen to believe that 20 is plenty on some of those smaller streets. We've got some big concerns on Center Street here, where we live, and some of those back streets where there's cars parked on either side. So I think 20 on some of those really small, narrower residential streets is a smart idea. That being said, we can all save gas and save a little bit of money if we all slowed down. But what is the true cost going to be? It might be a great idea, but when we get the signage up, what is the actual cost going to be to the city? We shouldn't be spending any money right now. So proceed slowly, figure out what it's going to cost, seek input from the particular neighborhoods that might be really for it, and there might be particular neighborhoods that are against it. That's sort of the luxury of this idea, is it can be altered kind of varying what the traffic counts kind of suggest, and then also what public works studies have done, and of course what the residents are saying.
Okay, thank you both. And we'll move now to the closing statements. And in terms of the rotation we've been on, Kelly, I believe you'll have the first closing, and we've offered the candidates 2 minutes for their closing statements, and they can use the time as they choose. Kelly?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, In the City for Good. And thank you, everybody watching now and later at a different time. I appreciate the engagement, and I appreciate you reaching out to the candidates to help the voters become more informed. I'm a dedicated community leader, and I'm a lifelong resident of Rochester. I've been an independent design contractor for about 23 years, and I put myself through college and graduate school while raising my family and working through some really, really difficult, challenging life issues. I sit on numerous boards and advisory panels for local city organizations, as well as the county Community Services Advisory Board. I represent a wide variety of residents in a lot of the community advocacy and community work that I do and the projects that I work on. And I also serve as president here in the Eastside Neighborhood Association. Rochester is transitioning right now through a pandemic, racial disparities, and significant changes in city staff. The next Ward 4 council person needs to be effective from day one. I plan on hitting the ground running. I've trained for this. I've been attending city council meetings for some time. I've interned with Mark Bilderbach, who is retiring. I'm the candidate to take on this role. I would very much appreciate your vote. I listen to the voters. I listen to the residents when I engage with them, out walking, door knocking, and hanging flyers. I get things done. I have a track record for making things happen. And I also have a heart. I'm a mom, longtime resident of Rochester, and a community advocate and involved in a lot of organizational works. Please reach out if you'd like more information. My phone number's on the website, kelly4council.org, and looking forward to talking with constituents, getting to know people, and just doing more good for the city in this new role that I would really like to take on. It's simply an extension of what I really love doing, and that's serving Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And Katrina?
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you, In the City for Good as well. And thank you, everyone who has listened and been a part of this. I am a business owner in town. I decided to run because I've seen so many inequities happening in the last few months, so many promises from those in city positions that they were here for us, that they hear our communities pleas for help, but the actions that followed were completely different. When you serve on a city council, you represent the entire city, big, small business owners, and you need to listen to everybody. Everyone's voice matters and everyone needs to be heard. We are Rochester. We're a town built by farm families and doctors with small town values and morals, and we continue to grow and change. But the same respect, integrity, inclusive, honest, and welcoming aspects of our community need to stay intact. One of the main things today, we need to focus on bringing our community back together. There's so many things changing today and in the last 4 months since the shutdowns, and we need to find ways to work together. It's so important for our economy right now that we all come together. No matter where you came from, no matter where you're at today, we need to work together as a team and make sure that we are doing everything that's right for everybody in this town. Affordable housing, incredibly important. Sustaining and reviving and making sure that our small businesses survive winter, incredibly important. People need to pay attention and know what's happening in our town. They need to have a voice. They need to know that they matter, and they need to be able to impact the decisions that are being made, the budgets, where money is being spent, how it's being spent. And the option of an app, like Mark Bransford in the last debate had said, great idea. Why not? Why not make sure that everybody knows when there is going to be a change, when something in your neighborhood, when something in this town might be coming up for conversation and community input is needed. If you don't know, you can't be there. And I think we need to find ways to make sure that people are aware and include them. A quote that I love, Harriet Tubman said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and change the world." I will not change the world, but I hope I can help guide change in our city for the better and move us forward. So please, I hope that I have earned your respect and your trust, and most importantly, your vote in this next election, whether it is mail-in or in person. And if you would like to know more about me, you can go to my website, it's Pullum4council.com. And thank you again, everybody, for watching, and we will see you at the next meeting.
Okay. Thanks to both of the candidates for joining us this evening and participating in our forum. We do urge you to visit their websites and find out more about their positions. There are certainly other forums that they participated in and will be participating in that will give you more information about these candidates. In the City for Good is founded on the notion of civic participation and civic governance. We believe in that and encourage that and try to promote it. And some of us in the community take on a special role and stand for elected office. And Kelly and Katrina have done that. And we really do appreciate their commitment and what it takes, not only to run for office, but later to serve. And so we thank them for that as well. Again, we've been streaming this live on Facebook. It'll be available for replay depending upon when Facebook makes that possible. But we've also recorded it, and that will be available on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow morning. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tomorrow evening, beginning at 6:30, we'll have our final two forums with the candidates for Ward 6 and the two candidates who are running for the council at large position. Have a good night, and I don't have to wish you a safe drive home because maybe you're already there. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.